I don't think there's much that's more frustrating than a good game that also is bad, or a bad game that's also good. And those are the games we're talking about today. Ready, set, go. Now, there are hundreds and hundreds of games that are good games that have very bad issues surrounding them that make the game ultimately not good or bad at the same time while still being good deep down. And while we're not going to be able to touch on every single one of them, we need to talk about FPS games. I think this applies to a lot of first-person shooter games, but whatever your FPS game is, there's a good chance you fall into this boat, especially if it's a competitive FPS game. Because I feel like nowadays competitive FPS games are some of the hardest games to actually handle and manage as a game developer. Call of Duty easily gets a ton of hate from the wider gaming community. A new game released every year can be cool, but also really annoying when you feel like the game's quality isn't up to par. No matter how much you hate Call of Duty, especially the new one, Black Ops 6, or the current one, Black Ops 6, you can't deny the fact that there's an unprecedented amount of content. There is campaign, which actually was kind of fun. Multiplayer with a bunch of maps and new maps being added for free. And then they have other little things like Prop Hunt was kind of fun, even though they messed up Prop Hunt. And like a bunch of other game modes. Zombies, a big selling point for a Black Ops game. And it's like more traditional zombies. It's actually pretty good in Black Ops 6. And then like Warzone and stuff. If you're into the whole battle royale stuff, there's a lot to do and a lot of time to be spent in Call of Duty. That can be a great time. But with first-person shooter games, it definitely feels like they went through the checklist to get all of the features into the game, but they kind of missed the intuitiveness in how the game flows overall. And I think that when there's complaints about how the multiplayer works, or there's complaints about how little nuanced things in zombies go, or how unlocks work, it's something that could easily be avoided if there was just like a little more effort put into it. And with a game like Call of Duty released on a yearly cycle, you end up getting a game that is feature rich, which is awesome, but a lot of little things and errors and oversights that really just slowly chip away at the player experience. We don't really need to go into every single detail when it comes to Call of Duty Black Ops 6, because I'm sure if you've played Black Ops 6 or you followed Call of Duty, you know what we're talking about. Like, look at Warzone, for example. The meta has been falling apart for years, and while you could still have fun playing Warzone, it's definitely not this like open, go in there and, you know, craft your own way to winning the game. It's definitely like go in there with a set strategy and formula and just do the best you can. And that really takes away from the experience of what made Battle Royales so exciting and spontaneous to begin with.
You know, when Warzone 1 dropped, it was new and exciting, and there wasn't this whole meta thing going on immediately. And that was the most fun we've had with Warzone. Just the whole focus on the gun meta, on the specific gun loadouts, just kind of ruined it for me. And I think you too.
Yeah, I mean, it was weird in itself. Modern Warfare 2 and 3 was a whole weird 2-year period where all the guns in Modern Warfare 2 would be carried over from Modern Warfare 3, except all the guns in Modern Warfare 2 weren't as strong as the guns in Modern Warfare 3. It was bizarre. I miss Verdansk for Warzone. I know it's coming back, but I have this feeling it's not going to hit the same way as it originally did, and that's just the way things are. And Call of Duty obviously has to be on this list, but there's other first-person shooter games depending on what your first-person shooter game is, because I feel like FPS games are huge games that fall into this, like a good game that is also bad. Overwatch originally was a good game, and then it became bad. As many people know, Overwatch has finally seen competition with Marvel Rivals, and Overwatch hasn't been keeping up. Not that they've really been keeping up with what they should have been doing over the last couple of years anyways, but there was at least something great with the original Overwatch. Even going to Overwatch 2, there was something awesome with the foundation of that game. People spent a lot of hours learning the characters and getting good at the game. And I think that there's always going to be people who are nostalgic for the times that they played Overwatch and had a great time. But as the game continues to evolve, and also not evolve at the same time, it's not going to be the same experience going back to Overwatch whenever people get tired of other games and want to return. It's just this changing system that isn't good. And I think that that is a shame, because I do think people miss Overwatch for what they remember it being in its glory days.
Yeah, and I mean, Overwatch was very unique. There was like this world building, you know what I mean? Like, it just felt like this cool futuristic setting, and it just tied it together with the competitiveness. You know, everybody likes a good map design. You don't want to play on some boring ass map, but they just kind of lost it when they announced this campaign thing for Overwatch 2, and then it didn't come. They didn't do anything deeper. They basically didn't really change anything and release a sequel. And now, Marvel Rivals has been out for 4 months, and it still has 10 times the players that Overwatch has. You know what I mean? Marvel Rivals isn't going away. I think Overwatch is on the verge of going away more than Marvel Rivals. And it is just because they were slacking for so long. And they put out this weak sequel that just kind of didn't enhance the game enough.
For a game that wants to capture a massive player base, it feels like there's a skeleton crew working on the game, and that's not what they need. If they've wanted to compete in the FPS genre at all, they got away with it for a really long time, and now they're finally facing competition, and they're dealing with the repercussions of years of not doing what they should have done. It's sad because I think Overwatch at its core is a cool game, and when I play Marvel Rivals, it made me think of Overwatch characters that I kind of wish I was able to play. So it's like, I can go back to Overwatch and play a character I've practiced and I've gotten good at, but it's not going to be the same experience. And it's not going to be a polished one either.
And I think Overwatch used to be top 3 hero shooters, and I think it fell out of that range and, it just got over-trumped by a lot of other games nowadays.
Are there any other FPS games we should include here? Halo's not a good game, so we can't put it on the list.
Yeah, actually, I might keep that line, dude, actually.
Luke and I have been playing Rainbow Six Siege pretty much the entire time we've known each other, and I remember buying the game at launch in 2015, nearly 10 years ago. And I still sometimes don't think I'm getting better at the game.
Any advice for getting out of silver after 10 years? Rocket Sloth. Take your Xbox and put it in the bottom of a lake. 10 years? Rocket Sloth. 10 years. A decade!
Rainbow Six Siege is my personal hell when it comes to a game that is good, but is also bad. I mean, if you talk to any Rainbow Six Siege player, they will all give you their own unique list of reasons as to why Rainbow Six Siege is not good. Why there are issues with the game. 10 years of development, 10 years of updates, changes, and all these things along the way, but there's not another game that just feels as tactical and exciting and competitive in the same way that Rainbow Six Siege does. It's like a toxic relationship. No matter how much I'm ready to quit the game and leave it behind, inevitably I come back to it to play it just a little bit longer.
Just a rush of dopamine. I don't know, I can't get it anywhere else.
It is crazy how addicting the game can be, especially if Rainbow Six Siege falls into the type of game that you enjoy playing. But with Rainbow Six Siege and most first-person shooter games that try to have a competitive scene around it, there's always going to be changes that are made to the game that dramatically affect the way that the game evolves moving forward, and things that the developers miss that continue to hinder the game for a long, prolonged amount of time. It took nearly 10 years for them to finally address people who were cheating on console. Rainbow Six Siege, it is a controller-only game if you play on console, or at least originally it was for the first 9 years of the game existing. However, people would utilize Zim, which would allow them to use a mouse and keyboard and essentially have movement that isn't actually possible with a controller. So finally, after years and years of this being a very big issue, Ubisoft was like, hey, we know that these people are cheating, so we're going to introduce a thing called Mousetrap, which can detect very highly accurately who is cheating, and it'll give them a slight input delay over prolonged use. What? What's really interesting about Mousetrap, though, is it made a statement from Ubisoft to the rest of the player base that cheating in this regard is kind of okay, because they weren't banning people who were using Zim. So they were essentially being like, we don't want to punish them too hard where they will leave the game and stop playing, but we want to discourage it.
It's like stealing from Walmart, and instead of calling the police, they just make you run around the building one time and then you're out of breath, and that's your punishment. But they still let you go with the item that you stole.
You would have a ton of issues where people would play on controller because they're on console, they're used to controller. It's not like it's too far out of their thing. And then when it comes down to the wire, like they're last alive, they have to clutch up a round, the game's getting close, then they would activate their Zim and use it for those rounds to cheat. And then the detection wouldn't give them too harsh of a penalty.
But also, it never worked, and people found workarounds immediately. They would just spin on a controller input, and then the game would be like, oh, they're obviously no controller, and then they would switch to mouse and keyboard.
There was definitely a direct indication you could tell when someone was plugging in their Zim or activating their Zim, because the spectator would have this like glitch where the camera would like spin and lock in place, and you knew that they were then using a mouse and keyboard. It was actually incredible. Rainbow Six Siege already is going through this phase of being a game that's been supported for a really long time. 10 years, one of the longest live service first-person shooters on the market. We've seen over years the amount of content gradually being less and less with each seasonal update. First, there was 2 operators a season, then it was 1, then it was like 1 every other season in a rework. New maps are few and far between. Every year or so, maybe we'll get a new map. It's been a while already.
And besides the quantity of content, the quality of content also declined, you know? Back in the day, a new operator would be introduced and it would change the meta, and he would actually be impactful. People would pick him. Now, I feel like they just keep releasing operators that completely suck, that nobody wants to play. Their gadgets are useless. They don't change the meta up. It doesn't keep the game interesting. Just no changes in meta just make the game feel boring over time. And I think eventually Siege will run into this, issue, and, has run into the issue in the past where the player base dropped, because they couldn't keep the content fresh.
The whole matchmaking system for ranked gameplay is really, really scuffed with how they balance you out with the teams, and they keep reworking it. The amount of times they've redone the ranking system and it still ends up not being good is actually kind of insane. But there's no other game out there that has that adrenaline push that we feel when we play Rainbow Six Siege. So we keep coming back. We love the game. That's the problem that we keep running into. And if anything, it can be even more frustrating when you love a game, when content that you really enjoy, parts of the game that you really like, change in a way that it'll never likely go back to. House, midway through Rainbow Six's life, was an amazing map that got reworked into something that didn't really make sense. Why does this bedroom have a hallway in the back of the bedroom that connects it to another room? It's not very practical to how a house is, and that's how a lot of the reworks with Rainbow Six Siege have gone. Consulate was finally reworked, changing it up from how it was originally in 2015, and the building makes no sense whatsoever. I have never, not even in movies, seen a building that has a layout like Consulate. The maps that at least somewhat make sense are older maps from the beginning. New maps that came in, the layout is just all over the place.
They rework maps and then they take them out of ranked. How many times have we had a Favela, Hereford Base, House? These maps get reworked and then they're still not good enough for competitive play. What is the point of changing them then? You know what I mean? Because the reason to change them was to make them more competitive, right? What is the point of reworking these maps and then taking them out and ruining the old stuff, the old content, and making it not accessible? I'm very interested in seeing what Siege X is going to be, the big reveal that we're going to get in 7 days, 6 days? But we're already in the year 10 right now. We already got the first year 10 operator, and they kind of suck.
They can close doors.
On attack, you can close off your teammates from attacking, which is awesome.
We won last night in an overtime defense round because they had the new operator and that operator had closed a door, and then they needed to plant the bomb, and the last player alive couldn't get into the room to plant the bomb and ran out of time, and we won the whole game because of the new operator. It's actually insane. All these people who are still hanging in there have no idea what we're talking about because it's Rainbow Six Siege. Very specifically, we apologize, but
I'm sorry.
Rainbow Six Siege is a good game that is bad at the same time. Ryse Son of Rome is another game that could really go either way on how people perceive it, because there are some great things going for it that definitely put Ryse Son of Rome in a small experience as a great game, a good game, dare I say. However, when you have something good, but that's all you have, and it's not the biggest experience, you have to come up with creative ways to make your game a game. And I think that that's where things kind of fall apart. So the good side of Ryse Son of Rome. Visually, for an Xbox One launch title, it was beautiful. It was a cool, unique experience, and the combat was pretty good. It was a solid thing. The bad side about the game is that the story was very boring. It was pretty boring and predictable. Then on top of that, the gameplay side of things is just a rehash of the same thing over and over and over again. The first couple times it's fine, but as you continue through, it's just the same thing. They could have maybe done more with where they took the story and what direction they went on. And I think that ended up impacting the game pretty heavily. The fact that at the end of the day, it was this repetitive experience that the game ended up not receiving the highest ratings. If this was just a tech demo of a game and you just showed this off in isolation, it's impressive. It really is. It is a good experience. The presentation and the way that the game released and the content and the way that they handled the campaign just wasn't really the best way to give their game justice. And unfortunately, that's what happened. I think Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts is a really great example of a good and bad game at the same time, because in its own right, if you were looking to find some vehicle customization platformer type game in the mid-2000s, Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts fits that to a T. However, as a third game in a very beloved franchise and, under new ownership and coming out of a long hiatus that the series had been in for a minute, it was not good at all. Not the sequel that players wanted from Banjo-Kazooie. And obviously people thought it was supposed to be a sequel. It kind of sold itself a little bit as a sequel in some of those early trailers that it had. Now, in its own right, the gameplay itself is fine for what it sets out to be, but for a Banjo-Kazooie game, it wasn't good. And at the same time, it did say something about the development cycle that they just didn't care that the game wasn't remotely at all like the predecessors that people liked. So to this day, Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts kind of goes down in history as like a more controversial game in the community because Banjo-Kazooie fans typically don't like it, but people who played Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts for what it was do genuinely like it if it was like detached from the franchise name itself. Saints Row 4 might be another great game that kind of fits into this category as well. This game was probably one of the games that marked the beginning of the end for Saints Row. I mean, there wasn't too much after Saints Row 4. There was a standalone DLC, a hiatus, Agents of Mayhem, and the reboot. And then that was it for Saints Row. But Saints Row 4, obviously, the development was like strangled a bit. They wanted to do something bigger. They didn't have time to do something bigger or the funds to do something bigger. So instead, they had to kind of spin off of some DLC that they had planned for Saints Row 3 and make a game from that. And they also had to try to beat the release date of Grand Theft Auto 5. So instead, they took Saints Row 3 and just gave you the ability to literally go and move however you want and fight overpowered and scale the game that way. And you know what? It was a really creative way to make a new game out of an existing game, and one of the better examples of reusing assets and resources to make a new experience. That being said, Saints Row 4 definitely doesn't have the same technological jump that like Saints Row 2 to Saints Row 3 had, and it was obvious. So Saints Row 4 is a good superhero game, maybe not the best Saints Row game, but a good superhero game. I mean, obviously it was a big rehash and you could tell that a lot of corners were cut to get the game out the door, and the development was like sped along. But the game was solid, it was polished, it played well, and if you're playing through the original Saints Row game, even though Saints Row 4 jumps the shark multiple times, it's still probably a mandatory experience for someone who wants to see the whole Saints Row series. I would say play through Saints Row 1, 2, 3, and 4, even if, 4 seems a little out there. Gat Out of Hell, probably optional. Saints Row 4, though, I still think it was good enough and still a good game where you can have fun with it after Saints Row 3. It just wasn't as bombastic as Saints Row 3. We can't make this video without talking about the Madden series. Now, a lot of you probably don't care about football, but if you do care about football and you watch the NFL, you probably know that Madden is a pretty cool simulated football experience. It's the only, at least NFL endorsed football experience. And we don't even really have to talk about this one for too long. If you've played Madden, you already know why it's on this list. Big picture, every year, Madden is, I guess, a good game. I mean, it's using the same formula that it used 2 decades ago. And there's something really satisfying about landing a deep catch or having an amazing run play get you a first down or even a touchdown. But every year, Madden is $70 and it's pretty much the same exact game, just with an updated roster, which nowadays definitely is something that could be achieved with just like an update. Nonetheless, football bros will buy this game anyways every year, and if you're more of a gamer enthusiast who still likes Madden, you probably want to keep up with where the player base is, so when you try to play online, there's other people, so then you might fall into the buying it as well. I'm not here to criticize your purchase decisions, but every time I decide I want to play a Madden game, or I do decide to buy a Madden game like I did with this last one for the first time in a few years, it pains me to buy it because I know that in a few months the game will become obsolete and the next game will come out. I mean, we can criticize Call of Duty for doing their yearly releases all we want, but at least Call of Duty looks like a different game sometimes. At least there's different maps. There's something that's changing. Something was developed. There's usually a campaign. Madden, on the other hand, I mean, I guess they did try a campaign like twice. But outside of that, it's pretty much the same game. Matter of fact, there's voice lines in the game, like of the announcers explaining a play or doing their little back and forth banter that they do, that has been recycled for years and years and years. I know for a fact that some of the voice lines that I heard in this last Madden, Madden 25, was at least used in maybe Madden 19, definitely Madden like 20 moving forward. Like, I've played the games when they would come on like the Game Pass EA crossover thing, and I could play that, or I could do the free trial for 10 hours. And I've heard heard these lines before because I would get so irritated because one of the dudes on the announcer thing would always talk about how I like sold out the team on the play that I did. And he would say it every single year. It was so specific that it was recognizable across each year of playing the game. I know I'm not great at Madden, but come on. Also, you can be good at Madden and you can know a lot about football and strategy and football strategy, which is a big part of the sport. Doesn't mean you'll be good at Madden because Madden has like the way that you can play it if you're a sports fan, and then like the way you can play it if you are a gamer and you know the ins and outs and the technicalities of how the game works, which makes online play a lot of the time not fun because if someone knows the perfect timing and like have mastered the art of pressing the button at the right time to intercept the ball, you will just throw an absurd amount of interceptions and it starts to not feel fair after a while. I know I'm not good at the game, but man, this game really, when I play online, makes me feel like I am not good at the game. And I don't know, I just wanted to add that in there. When it comes to Madden, it's a good experience if you like NFL, and I know there's a lot of people that love Madden. It sells incredibly well every year, and now that college football is back with EA doing that, I'm sure those bundles will continue to sell well. But I do have to say, I miss the days where the NFL brand wasn't exclusively tied to just Madden. There was a time where you could see real NFL teams in like NFL Blitz for the Nintendo 64. That game was incredible. Do you see these tackle animations and the screaming that they made? That game was awesome, and I wonder if Blitz would have survived longer as a series had they not lost the NFL exclusivity, because Blitz was still really fun. Yeah, I don't know. There were other games too that had done football things in the past, and I just feel like it's been unfair that Madden gets the NFL exclusivity here because they can just continue to release uninspired games and have virtually no competition.
Back 4 Blood was hyped as this big return to form for the developer of Left 4 Dead 1 and Left 4 Dead 2. You know, everybody was all in because we never got a Left 4 Dead 3. So, you know, maybe the original people can make something that captures that magic. And me and Elijah were some of those people that got in on that hype train. And we definitely played the game from launch. We played through all of the game, I believe, with 4 people. We played with Dim and Tails, if I remember correctly.
Maybe Mitch was there?
Oh, maybe we had some recurring...
alternating people every once in a while.
Yeah, it was like SNL. The game, it was okay. It was good, but also it wasn't as good as Left 4 Dead. And there was a lot of questionable things about it, especially coming with the post-launch updates and stuff. And while it was fun, it definitely wasn't really memorable. And I think the whole card system was kind of a questionable decision, you know, blah, 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 cosmetic.
It definitely didn't live up to Left 4 Dead. It doesn't feel like Left 4 Dead 3, but it's a fun game in its own right, in its own bubble. It's a good game. Like, you can play through it, have a good time. But if you're looking for Left 4 Dead 3, Back 4 Blood wasn't it.
Yeah, and I mean, if someone asked me if to play like a zombie horde shooter, I would still recommend them Left 4 Dead 2 over Back 4 Blood.
Yeah, I think so. Unless like they're looking for something like Left 4 Dead, but they're okay with lowering the standards a little bit just because of the balancing of the game.
Well, the gameplay itself was fun. I don't think we ever like wanted to replay the game.
We went back to play the DLC because I think it was on sale, and we played it for like 20 minutes. And then I think we stopped playing, and I think we went and played Redfall.
Oh, dude, that's...
Dude, Redfall? I wasn't going to put Redfall on this list. No. Okay, no, Redfall's a bad game, but I had fun playing it, but I don't think that makes it a good game. That was just... It was pretty bad, yeah.
Go watch our Redfall video. That video didn't get enough love. That video was a banger.
We forced ourselves to play through Redfall in like a week, like a year after the game came out. And it was a wild experience.
You could make the argument saying like, oh, we have all these expectations. But I mean, the way they advertised it, they were like, oh, this is the original team. They even called it the 4. They had the 4 in the title, you know what I mean? They definitely tried to write that Left 4 Dead 3 train. And, I mean, now we can, we should be allowed to criticize them based on that because that's what they were going for. And
right.
I don't know, they disappointed us, I didn't disappoint them.
No, you disappointed them, actually. They made that game just for you. Because they wanted to smite you.
Damn, dude.
Spite you. And smite you, I guess.
League of Legends, or LoL, or whatever you want to call it, is one of the most popular online games out there. And there's millions of players logging in daily and grinding this game in many different forms. Whether it is just like the, fun casual modes, or the ranked games, or even the TFT mode that they introduced a couple years ago. And I have been a League of Legends player since like 2010. So for almost 15 years, for half my life, I've been playing this game. Not daily so much anymore, but still every now and then. So I definitely know all the ins and outs when it comes to League of Legends and why players find themselves caught in this paradox where they complain about the game but can't stop grinding it. One of the strongest aspects of League of Legends is its complexity and depth. It is really like no other game I've ever played, and even playing Overwatch or Rainbow Six, like other things that focus on individual characters with abilities, they are definitely not as in-depth as League of Legends is. To put this into perspective, Overwatch 2 has around 40 playable characters, I believe, and League of Legends, on the other hand, has over 170 different characters. Pair that with frequent balance patches and like a big patch that changes a lot of the game every year, and a meta that shifts all the time, it just makes for this really competitive experience where you constantly have to be on your toes and you constantly have to keep up to kind of understand what is happening. And with these changes, there's constantly a new flow of different interactions, like, you're playing a role and all of a sudden there's a new character, or one character that wasn't so good shows up more often, and it kind of keeps the game spicy, even if you personally keep playing the same character or role. This ensures that there's no two matches that are the same, and that just keeps players engaged as they master all these strategies. Now, this complexity also is a major source of frustration, and if you're a new player, you have to be so dedicated to even attempt to get into League of Legends. It really takes a long time. And then, as I mentioned, with frequent balance patches and frequent changes in meta, it is even harder to get into League of Legends as a new player. The experience for new players is definitely really bad. Like, look at this feature they introduced recently, and if you don't know anything about League of Legends, just for a second, put yourself into the mindset of someone who just downloaded League of Legends and knows nothing about it, and let me know if you understand what this message that pops up means. Recently, they introduced this warning, and this is what pops up. Lane swap detected, please leave the area. Now, if you're a new player, you don't know what a lane swap is. You don't even know what's going on. And this is what I kind of mean. They just throw all these mechanics at you, and it becomes a really bad experience if you're a new player. But even if you're not a new player, this game sucks sometimes. Obviously, as a veteran player, you're also impacted by all the balance changes, and sometimes champions and characters just become overpowered and become unfairly strong, and it's really annoying to deal with, especially when your team doesn't know what to do. Which brings me to the next point, why this can be a really bad game. It is a team-based experience, and unlike single-player games, you're really reliant on your team at all times in order to win. League of Legends is a objective-based game. At the end of the day, you're supposed to take down different objectives across the map as a team, and you will get rewards for that, and you become stronger of those. Now, even if you understand these basics, it's incredibly hard to vibe with your team in a way where you will actually be able to do these objectives. The game is amazing when you're able to coordinate with your team, but just constantly running into players that turn off their brain and don't do anything besides sit in their role and sit in their lane and don't want to play as a team, it just makes it an awful experience. This is the best example I can give of how bad this League of Legends teamwork thing gets. For a long time, there's this term in the League of Legends community where people refer to themselves as being held hostage in a game when your teammates are so bad they don't want to surrender or they don't want to end the game. To a lot of players, it just feels like you're being held captive by your teammates. Also, I've played Call of Duty over the years, I played Counter-Strike, I played a lot of different competitive online games, but not a single game or even Twitter or anything can reach the heights of toxicity that a League of Legends ranked games reach. It is so bad that Riot Games has refused to put in a voice chat into the game because they know it would just lead to more toxicity. Now, don't get me wrong, I still think there's a lot of good parts to the League of Legends community, and especially the esports scene is very fun to follow. But man, the regular goobers you meet in ranked are beyond annoying and beyond toxic. There's so many times, and I'm not saying I've never fallen into this either, but there's so many times where I lost a ranked game just because someone couldn't stop typing instead of focusing on the game. Or where someone just intentionally feeds the enemy team kills because he's mad at something or someone or himself. I don't know. And I think League of Legends can just be such an emotional, intense experience that it is really hard to stop playing, but at the same time, it also really sucks to play. It's like this double-edged sword and you're constantly being stabbed with it.
I don't want to beat a dead horse because we talk about Pokemon, it seems like almost as much as Halo. Obviously, there were some pretty big public outcry about the quality of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet at launch. It wasn't good. There were a ton of glitches. Visually speaking, the game doesn't feel like a AAA game. And when you realize that Pokemon is the highest grossing franchise, like media franchise ever, you start to wonder, why did they like cut so many corners with this game? One of my big complaints is the fact that Pokemon games, besides the fact that they should be more polished, don't have voice acting at this point. That doesn't make sense to me. Persona is incredible, fully voice acted game. Pokemon should be able to do it too, I think.
I mean, I don't know. I think Pokemon games are still fun though. Like, I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. I loved playing through Scarlet and Violet because it's a good game that's also bad. See what I did there? Back to the name of the video.
It's like CinemaSins roll credits or whatever they used to say.
They were like ding.
And then they did it for like 10 years and nobody found it funny anymore.
Wolfenstein Youngblood was like panned heavily when the game came out. A lot of fans specifically didn't like the game, but for what the game is, it's not awful. Like it's good and bad at the same time. I think it's good in the fact that they wanted to do a spin-off and let you play with your friends. And I am all for more games doing co-op. Like if you're going to make a mediocre game, at least give us co-op so we can enjoy the mediocrity together. And that's what they did. And, you know, for what it is, it's a shorter, more linear, cooperative take on Wolfenstein, reusing assets from Wolfenstein 2. And in that regard, it's fine. The story is fine. I mean, it moves the story along a bit. They definitely could have done a lot worse with the story. At least they're like embracing a lot of the things that were set up in Wolfenstein 2. But, I mean, it's not nearly as good as Wolfenstein 1 or Wolfenstein 2. New Order and New Colossus is what I'm talking about specifically. Old Blood was a great standalone DLC. Young Blood probably wasn't as good as Old Blood. That's clear. But it was co-op and had that going for it. So I don't know, like I can't fault them as much. I know people don't like this game, but I think you could sit down and enjoy Young Blood with the right person, play through the game, and have a generally positive experience. And I can't say that for every co-op game, but I will give a couple of points if a game goes out of the way and does co-op. Redfall, bad game that has co-op, and that's like the saving grace where maybe you'll play through it with friends. It's still not a good game. Youngblood, at least the experience is good enough overall with the co-op, but I get why people were upset. It just doesn't quite live up to the other ones. So it is bad compared to Wolfenstein games, but on its own, in an isolated co-op experience, it's good. Redfall is bad. I'm not saying that Redfall's good. Okay, Sea of Thieves has a lot going for it. On one end, it is a visually beautiful game with really cool co-op mechanics, the whole way that you operate a ship, the way you can work together in tandem with your team, the quests and puzzle solving can be really cool as well. But the experience of playing Sea of Thieves is always 100% a mixed bag, which for a little bit is kind of part of the appeal of the game. As a new player to Sea of Thieves, you might have a miserable time when you first start playing. There's a high likelihood someone will just roll up on your boat and sink you, and that's not fun. But after a while, you start to get skilled. You start fighting back. You lose your loot so many times to Reaper boats that you decide to become the Reaper boat, and you go and you steal new players' loot. And it just becomes the circle of life. It's a dog-eat-dog world, and you just have to get used to it. Or at least that's how Sea of Thieves used to be. And sure, that in itself was both good and bad at the same time for gamer experience, but it kept the ecosystem alive because it's a game about being a pirate where you steal from other pirates. That's the point of a pirate game. That's what the whole game was founded on originally. Going on quests and having the threat of having your stuff stolen is a part of that adrenaline experience. Sea of Thieves kind of was introduced before the modern day extraction shooter, and there's a lot of similar aspects here. You go, you get your stuff, you try to sell it before someone comes and steals it from you by killing you and sinking your ship. Now, I distinctly remember when Sea of Thieves for me completely peaked and never would be great again. And it was when I hit this specific clip, which I'll play now, where it's just insane. Sea of Thieves never would have a moment that topped that exact moment right there that I had. I still had fun with it for a while, but over time, the more you start to learn about the game, the more you start to realize how many glaring issues there are in Sea of Thieves that weren't being addressed by the developers. Like I said, the game is visually amazing. The soundtrack incredible. Some of the events and random encounters are really cool, but hit detection not working properly is a massive issue in a game where these moments where you make a shot that should kill someone doesn't kill them. It makes or breaks the entire experience. It's insane how in all of the updates for Sea of Thieves, they just would be like, we know that there is an issue where hit detection sometimes doesn't work, and we're like monitoring it and looking to progressively make improvements over time. For years, this was in their little like changelog every seasonal update. But then something I'm not a fan of was this huge decision to completely disrupt the ecosystem that they had created with Sea of Thieves by introducing a peaceful mode where players can choose to be in a private server with their crew and not have to worry about the big bad other players stealing their stuff. I mean, I get that Sea of Thieves does have a lot of like PvE experiences. It has 2 campaigns, a lot of puzzles, a lot of like new events being added. But like for the PvE event where you do the whole like Pirates of the Caribbean thing, a lot of that is in a whole separate server where people won't even attack you. Like you have to go transport yourself somewhere else. So you're good there. And I think the whole decision to add the PvE only servers for your crew was a terrible decision for the player base. You'll hear split discussions across the board. I think new players who got wrecked and had a bitter experience with Sea of Thieves definitely were like happy about it, but the core players that stuck with the game and made up majority of the people still playing the game really didn't like that change, because now what happens is when you go into a like public world, all you're getting are the sweaty players who feel like they are experienced enough at the game to go and try to steal your loot. So it becomes even more dangerous to play in a public server than it was before because of just the higher concentration of Reaper boats, Reaper players trying to steal your stuff, and like the new players who would sometimes just be floating by. Sometimes you drop by, make a funny joke and help them or something because they didn't have any loot to steal in the first place. They're nowhere to be seen because they're just playing in the private servers. I do get that they tried to decentivize playing in the PvE servers. Like you get a big reduction in the XP that you earn when you play in a private server, but who cares about XP? It's about the experiences. And I really don't think that this was the decision to make. I think maybe Sea of Thieves is doing better now than it had ever done, but it also released on a new platform that it wasn't on before, so there was an influx of new players there. But ultimately, I just think that they had something special, and now I don't even really care about coming back to Sea of Thieves because of that. I had a great time playing it. I mean, I know life that thing, hit Pirate Legend, was working well on my Athena quest, which is like the late game stuff, and I really don't want to go back. I think we definitely need to talk about Starfield, because man, when Starfield came out, there was so much hate for this game. And for a long time, I kind of felt like it was maybe blown out of proportion, but I also kind of get it. And I think that Starfield might be one of the perfect examples of a good game that is also bad. Context here. Starfield was pretty much the first main Bethesda RPG game that I played beginning to end. I tried Fallout, I tried Skyrim, never really could just like sink my teeth into them and feel like this was an experience I wanted to keep going with. But Starfield was sci-fi and space, and I was down for it. I was excited about the game before it came out, so I was ready to play the game when it came out. I did thoroughly enjoy my time with the game. I thought that the story was actually pretty decent. I felt like the universe building, taking place in our own galaxy, was such a cool idea. Getting to explore places that exist like in our known universe, but like obviously with like a fictional twist to it. I was curious what was going on Earth, and I was curious like what was going on in our own solar system, in the other systems that are based on real systems in the real universe. And it was cool. But at the same time, it was just like a Bethesda copy and paste of previous games, but with a space setting. It wasn't a game that lived up to 2023 expectations, like for what a AAA game should be like.
And especially with the lengthy development time, you know, people definitely have higher expectations if they wait like years or over half a decade for a new game.
I think Starfield is at its core a good game, but I think if you already had big experiences in previous Bethesda games, it felt like almost a rehash of experiences that you've had before, but with a space setting. They just needed to fill the Starfield world with more quests, more side stories, more of what there was in the game, because what's in the game is good. Like, it is a good game. There's like 4 main side quests besides the main quest, and they're all really, really good. But that's it. And there's a huge amount of places you can go and travel to with nothing going on. And they really could have filled a lot of those gaps in, but they didn't. Now, I do know other people who also experienced Starfield as their first Bethesda game as well. And one of my friends who that specifically also happened to, he loved Starfield through and through. And then when the Fallout TV show came out, he decided to give the Fallout games a try. And then he fell in love with those. And now in retrospect, he's like, yeah, Starfield isn't that great. But he originally thought it was incredible. So there's a good game in there. Mileage varies based on the player's own experiences, because there are a lot of things that are just like brought over that aren't new, that aren't innovative, unless you're experiencing them for the first time. But I did like ship building, and I spent a lot of time on that too. So
Elijah would invite me over to his house and then show me his ship for hours and hours.
And then I would be like, I'm starting over my ship. Time, scrap it and restart it. I never did finish my ship.
But don't you think that Elder Scrolls 6 is going to fall into the same thing, where people have these high expectations because they've been waiting? You know, how long did Starfield take to make before, like, Fallout 4, 2015, Starfield 2023, that's what, 8 years? Between there, obviously they released some other things.
Yeah, Fallout 76, dude, where's the love?
Yeah, where's the love, dude? Like, ask the 10 players that are still playing that.
I think Fallout 76 is probably seeing the biggest numbers it has seen in this last year.
Yeah, but I think
Since
still
launch.
more people play Fallout 4.
Maybe.
Fallout 4, 24-hour peak, 14,859 players. Fallout 76 has half those players.
Okay, but it had its all-time peak 1 year ago when the TV show came out.
That is true, and the all-time peak is 73,000, and the all-time peak for Fallout 4 is 500,000. So Fallout 76 is a pretty bad game that nobody wanted to play, and I think I stand firmly on that opinion. We've played it multiple times. It's boring as...
It is true. I really don't like it.
And then what else did they do? Elder Scrolls Blades, like a phone game. Who asked for that? You guys have phones? Type, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. And then, I mean, like, they just... People didn't give Starfield a fair chance, I think. Escape from Tarkov is one of the most intense and immersive first-person shooters ever made. It combines hyper-realistic gunplay, high-stakes survival mechanics, and a developer that sometimes makes very questionable decisions. It is similarly a very interesting and unique game, but also very frustrating a lot of times. One of Tarkov's main selling points is the realism. There's just a lot of realistic things about it, from like the detailed weapons, the realistic ballistics, the medical mechanics, how you gotta heal yourself up, you gotta patch yourself up, you can break your leg, you gotta get a splint, etc, etc. You get hit in different parts of the body, you gotta, you know, patch up a different part of the body. It is very realistic, and every firefight feels different, and each raid that you go into is an intense experience where, you know, a decision can make you survive or kill you. Now, this focus on realism takes away some quality of life features that, you know, kind of became standard with first-person shooters. There's no on-screen ammo and no traditional in-game map, which is fine if you're trying to keep it to realism, but you know, managing gear and dealing with injuries kind of feels clunky a lot of times. And I gotta say, sometimes it just kind of feels like you're trying to fight the UI more than actual players on the battlefield. And yes, obviously, the more you play, the more you get used to these different things missing, like, you know, the ammo counter or navigating the map without a clear objective. You kind of learn, you know what to do, you know how to navigate the game after a while, but it kind of makes it a bad experience for newcomers especially. And speaking from personal experience, even after like 200-300 hours on Tarkov, it doesn't get any easier. Now, the high risk, high reward thing is very fun, and you know, every raid is a gamble. You go in there, you can extract with some valuable gear and, you know, sell some stuff for millions of dollars, make some cash, you know. There's this whole flea market system where you can sell stuff you got in raid, and you can buy stuff from other people, and you know, there's just a lot of interesting mechanics even with the inventory management. And the more money you have, the better gear you have, the less you're susceptible to being shot, the more you can put a lot of armor on and get some good ammunition that will one-shot people. Tarkov players actually call these people that are all geared up Chads, because all they do is run around in like a juggernaut gear and shoot people, which doesn't quite feel fair as a new player or even like a lower tier player that doesn't have that much money yet. There's certain zones of maps you don't even dare to go to because you know that's where the Chads hang out, and you're probably just gonna get one-tapped. And while at first, it's kind of interesting to mess around, to test your limits, to find out where these like high gear players are, after a while, it just becomes boring and kind of feels unfair. Now, I could go talk on about the grind, how it's even hard to reach that level of like the flea market and stuff, and how it's really frustrating to go on a raid and just be killed by some BS. But actually, the thing for me that made me stop playing Tarkov is the amount of hackers that this game has. With there being no HUD, no kill cam, no nothing, it's really hard to tell if you got killed by a hacker. So it obviously makes it easier for hackers to hide because, there's no way to prove it. There was actually this really interesting video a couple years ago, and I'm gonna put it on screen right now. But basically in the video, the guy starts hacking and he kind of like does this leaning thing through the wall and sees if the other hackers will respond. And sure enough, there's a lot of instances where they actually start wiggling the same way he wiggles because they can see him through the walls. Even if you're not into Tarkov, it's kind of an interesting video to watch on online cheating and how prevalent and how common online cheaters actually are nowadays. So I highly recommend watching this video yourself. But the fact that you can get all this high gear loot and just get better gear than most of the players makes it a really popular game with hackers. And as far as I'm concerned, the developer doesn't really care about the cheaters. They don't really do anything to make this a better experience. And after that video release and kind of went viral within the Tarkov community, as far as I know, there wasn't really any change to the way the anti-cheat works or to the way they ban cheaters. It sucks because I think Tarkov is an incredibly interesting game and definitely the best extraction shooter out there because it does actually have high stakes. Not like Call of Duty DMZ where you run around an empty map and you kind of shoot some bots and stuff and it's really boring. It just felt like the glorified Spec Ops missions they did for like Modern Warfare 2019 or whatever. They were also really boring. But going back to Tarkov, the lack of polish to the game and the whole hacker issue and a lot of punishing mechanics just also make it a bad game at the same time.
Okay, this next one, Luke, you're going to maybe disagree with me on.
Can I ask, am I going to disagree when you say it's a good game or am I going to disagree when you say it's a bad game?
Probably that it's a good game.
Okay.
It's a bad game. It is a bad game. But there's some good in there.
Oh no. All right.
Sonic 06 from 2006 for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3.
All right.
Okay.
Well, why is it a good game?
Let's,
Wait. Can I rephrase that?
Yeah.
How is it a good game?
Well, first of all, for years, Luke thought he had created an original Sonic the Hedgehog character in his head. So when we would play Halo 5 in those like roleplay servers, we would go in and just like mess around. He would tell them about his original character he created called Silver the Hedgehog. He had no idea that that was a real character that actually existed. He thought he had created his own OC, and no, it's a real Sonic character.
I just saw some crappy fan art on DeviantArt like years ago, like I guess probably like 2007 or whenever Sonic 06 came out, and I thought it was like a made-up character. And
it wasn't even your own OC. You were taking someone else's OC. Everybody talks about how we would love to see a Sonic Adventure 3. Sonic Adventure 1, solid game, especially if it was a Dreamcast version, not the port later. Sonic Adventure 2, even better. Just took things to the next level. Both the Sonic Adventure games have different like campaigns you can experience. They tried to do it again with Sonic Heroes, but the gameplay was just really all over the place. Sonic 06, whether you like it or not, is the closest thing to a Sonic Adventure 3 game. There's 3 campaigns, 3 characters that all have side characters you also get to play as. And deep down in there was something. They were cooking something, and I don't know how to explain it, but I've 100%ed Sonic 06 before, and I kind of have been itching to go back to it. It's not polished at all. It is one of the glitchiest games. The loading times are insane. It's unfair at times. I don't know. It has that like scuffed Sonic feel. And maybe I'm nostalgic just because I played it as a kid, and that's it. I would rather play Sonic 06 than a lot of other games that are considered good. So what is it? There's something good in there somewhere. So bad it's good? I don't know.
I mean, fair. But, recently I played Sonic Adventure 2. I mean, I liked Sonic Adventure 2. The settings were cool and stuff. And then I tried Sonic 06. And I'm pretty sure I quit on the first or second level because it was just such bullshit.
When did you play through Sonic Adventure 1 and 2?
I mean, I don't think I played through them. That's what I'm saying. I don't think I beat them, but I played a good amount. You don't remember? I streamed it to you, and we did also that co-op thing for a while.
I remember that. Wait, didn't you watch me play Sonic Adventure 2?
No. I played on my own too. There was something we're doing. Maybe for the Sonic channel we're trying to start. But those games were still better than Sonic 06. You know what I mean?
No. Well, maybe a little bit. But Sonic 06 is like, other than the loading times and like the brokenness, like the and the bad story, It's almost as good as the other Sonic games. The threshold for a good Sonic game, I feel like, is a moving bar constantly, and it depends on where you get in will spit you out as to whether or not it's a good game. I think Sonic 06 was pushed out the door before they were able to update with a lot of the fixes, and then they just never updated it anyways, and it's a buggy mess. And the story was awful, and the gameplay wasn't the best. But it was a fun game. It's fun.
What's fun about it? Like, the gameplay isn't fun, the story isn't fun, the loading times aren't fun.
The gameplay is kind of fun sometimes. It's just like you never know it's like a randomizer. Like you never know what bullshit's gonna kill you. So like when you do finally beat a level, you're like, dude, I did it. Especially those running sections of Sonic where you have to just sprint, and if you run into an object, you're dead. Dude, those were the worst. But when you finally beat it, dude, you're like, oh, I never have to do that again. And then you realize there's 5 of those levels in the game. Or like
that
4
that
of
does
those
sound like a
levels.
fun experience. The way you described this
It's
made me think of the
fun.
last level of Halo 4, like the flying section.
That's also fun.
Is it?
I thought so. I thought that was the best part of Halo 4.
All right, yeah, we got to the depth of it.
All Sonic 06 needed was like the Chow Garden and maybe an update, and it would have been perfect.
Chow Garden. Did you hate the Chow Garden?
Kind of, but I thought it should have been there.
I mean, sure, they shouldn't cut features, yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about Assassin's Creed in this video, and I feel like this discussion could come up for literally any game in the Assassin's Creed franchise, and someone would agree with me for sure. So while I was planning on looking into whether or not I wanted to talk about Assassin's Creed, one main game came to mind, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, because I do feel like this game could potentially fit perfectly into a game that is both good and bad at the same time. So I went to Google, typed in Assassin's Creed Valhalla to like get some info on it, and right there's a Reddit post, the top banner of the Google search result, saying Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the best and worst Assassin's Creed game I've played in a while. So I know I'm not alone in my feelings on this, because right there, it's like a top post associated with the game. One of the strongest things about Assassin's Creed Valhalla is both the world building and actually the narrative story you experience through your playthrough of the game. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest Assassin's Creed fan. I play them occasionally from time to time. If it comes on Game Pass or like there's a setting in one of the upcoming games or something that looks really cool, I'll give it a try. Valhalla was one of the games I spent, full price on to give it a go, and I was impressed with like the storytelling, especially the introduction period, but also the fact that the game kind of leaned more into the whole modern day aspect of Assassin's Creed games, where like, it's supposed to be like a thing where you go like back into the ancestral time and experience these different time periods, but it's supposedly taking place in like the near future. I feel like that was an aspect that didn't really get highlighted as often in later Assassin's Creed games, even though it still canonically is a part of it. I felt like they kind of did a little bit more with how they were like going to connect things together back to that, again, reminding people, this is also a part of this universe. There's a lot of cool things with the gameplay this time around, where you do have the basic Assassin's Creed stuff, but they do different things like raids, and I remember riding around on a boat or something. That was a little boring actually, but I mean, it was a cool thing, I guess, that was new for this. But there were 2 major issues with Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Well, the game starts at like a breakneck pace of action. After you get through the little prologue introduction, the game slows down substantially, and that can be really, really jarring. A lot of the side activities aren't really maybe the most interesting or fun to play. Like, they were more just filler content to make the game feel longer, or that there was more to do, not necessarily content that is like, hey, players need to experience this. And then the game is like insanely long. And I mean, I'm all for games that have longer stories and more fleshed out stuff, but once they've kind of shown you what you're going to experience in a game, it can be easy to fall off when the story just keeps going on and on and on and on. And when I pay full price for a game, I want to experience the entirety of the game within reason. I mean, when it becomes this insurmountable time where I've already felt like I've experienced most of the game, but if I want to see the end of the story, I have to, grind through the same gameplay loop longer than what a player wants to. It's weird. This is a complaint I usually never have about games. I like long story games, but Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I want to say, might be one of the only examples I can think of where the game is a bit too long. There's some really awesome moments, like the big cities you can go in and experience and different locations that are great, and then those are exciting moments, but there's a lot of time where you're in like not those areas, and it's a little boring. Now, to be fair, there was a lot of post-game content with extra missions and extra story stuff added in that probably inflates the length of the game even more so than what an average person would experience. You probably can play through the whole game and focus on the main story in 60 hours, which is a pretty great length actually for a game, game. But when you've experienced everything and it just becomes like a rehash of the experiences over and over again without necessarily feeling like it moves the needle for the experience, I don't know. I just don't know. I feel bad complaining about the length of a game being too long. Like, it's so against everything that I usually feel about games, because nowadays so many games are way too short. But Assassin's Creed Valhalla might be the exception. Maybe. Still, I mean, it's a good game at the end of the day, more or less. But there's a lot of misses with it as well. Okay, you want to do Dark Pictures?
I don't even know where to start with these games, but there are these like games that are like these movies that you can play through in co-op, and they're really fun co-op games. They're really good, but they're also really stupid and incredibly buggy.
That's the best way to explain exactly what Dark Pictures game is. So if you've ever heard of The Quarry, or what was the one that you liked for the PlayStation 4?
Until Dawn.
Until Dawn. The Dark Pictures are essentially those types of games, but they are built co-op. They're built so that there's two people playing simultaneously, and the decisions you guys make together and individually will have an outcome on the story and who lives and who dies. And they were releasing this game yearly for the first season. There was a new game every year. It was its own unique story, for better or worse. And there were solid co-op titles. They always are incredibly buggy when they come out. Like, the glitches are usually cutscene related and usually really awkward. A lot of the dialogue choices, the way that the characters interact, because of the fact that they have to give you time to make the selections, completely takes you out of any immersion whatsoever. It is like you are playing as a character who is the most socially awkward person, and then there's just a group of them all that just happen to be together in this terrible situation, and they're all just like sitting there with these long pauses between what they say because it wants to give the player a chance to put an input in. It makes some weird things happen. There are weird glitches that can happen. The games miss a lot of points because of the awkwardness of the game themselves. There's other little issues that can come up along the way where some of the story choices that you make don't matter, which is really frustrating. But some of the choices you make do matter, and then other times there's some bad design where you're trying to do a run where you keep everyone alive, but if you don't know exactly what's going to happen, one bad decision or a decision based on what you thought was the right thing just like throws your whole run. And I would have preferred if they would have given you like some context clues to steer you in the right way. And I don't feel like it has that, which is like a storytelling problem for like that implicates the whole game design. Just an example of this, which I'm not going to spoil which game this is, but there was a moment in a game where I had to choose to like essentially kill the character that Luke was controlling. I didn't want to kill the character that Luke was controlling because I'm trying to keep everyone alive, right? But by me choosing not to choose the option that looks like it's going to kill the character that Luke was controlling, in turn, my character ended up dying and we failed our goal of trying to keep everyone alive. But it would have turned out that Luke's character would have survived in some miraculous way. It's just like little decisions like that where there's no way that you would have known the outcome. But still, Dark Picture games are good, solid games, but you have to be prepared for the bad parts of the game as well, and just like laughing at them and moving on.
They're definitely going for a very serious tone with their storytelling, but it comes out very comedic at almost all times.
Especially with some of the glitches we're having. I think a great example of a game that's good and bad at the same time was Marvel's Avengers. This game was ultimately leaning more into the bad side. It just was a live service superhero game that at launch had performance issues and kind of repetitive gameplay, but most of it was overshadowed by the fact that it was to be a live service game and you were supposed to like go back regularly to it. The whole model of Marvel Avengers was really, really weird, but also in the game was like a single player like experience. It wasn't really single player, but you get what I mean. Like a full-fledged story and diverse enough gameplay across the characters where you could tell there was some true passion and inspiration during the development phase to make a game where you got to actually feel like an Avenger. Then, as the game progressed over time, new content would be added, sometimes paywalled, but new content nonetheless that actually was even better than the base game itself. I think the biggest issue at the end of the day was the content a lot of the time felt kind of shallow and gameplay felt like it was a repetitive loop, and the way that the game was structured, where progression would be tied to sometimes repetitive missions, it became like a convoluted mess of a game that if it would have just been a co-op regular experience where you could just like play through the story beginning to end, and more of the development time was focused on making that a good experience rather than trying to figure out how to turn this game into a live service model that could be potentially innovative in new ways to charge players money, the game maybe would have succeeded and not have been like shut down in the way that it ended up getting shut down. This game truly was a roller coaster from when it was announced through its delay and then its initial release and then it getting better over time and people realizing, hey, like there's an interesting story here. There's like characters and they interact with each other and whatnot. But then there was all this other extra fluff that isn't nearly as fun to play, and that made up a majority of the game experience, meaning that people didn't want to keep playing. It's weird. It's good and bad.
Destiny 2 was also a game that was on our mind when we first started planning out this topic, and our friend Dim is a huge Destiny 2 player, like literally plays it every day. I don't know how he does it, so we just hopped on an Xbox party and asked him the hard-hitting questions on how he feels about Destiny 2. Also, don't worry about the Xbox party quality. We're just running it like it's a 360 days.
Hey, Dim, what's your opinion on Destiny 2 right now?
It's good and bad at the same time.
And there you have it.
But we did ask him a little bit more in depth what he means by that, so here it is.
Okay, final shape, it was good. The episode that came out with it was absolutely horrible. Made no I could not even understand the story of what was going on. The activities kind of sucked. And then like episode 2, I wish it did more. Still kind of bad. And this latest episode, so many bugs, so many problems. But it's like the best one they have so far. It's the worst performing season or episode with the amount of bugs that are going on. But it's also the best they've done.
So episodes is like their new season thing, right? That's what they switched to?
Yeah. They swapped from seasons, which were like 3 months, to episodes, which is 4 months, and they split those into 3 sections, like Act 1, 2, and 3.
Interesting.
I just tripped over my couch. So here's the thing. As we reach the end of our discussion here, I wanted to point out something real quick. We are thinking about taking these conversations before we edit them down for video and trying to do them on a live format on both YouTube and Twitch. So if you want to watch us live, go on your phone right now, pull up your calendar, and put this date and time that's on the screen in your calendar so you can hang out with us so it's not super awkward when we're like, hey guys, we're live, and no one's there.
Just crickets.
So it'd be really cool if like someone shows up so we can chat a bit before we get into the recording stuff and then hang out a little bit after.
Or, you know, maybe people will be able to point out some stuff we missed during the recordings even.
Right. And that's the second point I wanted to bring up. So this video was on good games that are bad at the same time. Well, what if we made a video on bad games that are good at the same time? Essentially a part 2 with just a flipped naming convention. So if there are games that we missed, because this is such a massive category, and look how long the video is already getting, let us know in the comments, and we will go through our comments and pick some games to talk about when we do revisit this topic in the future. Cool. I feel good about this. Thank you to our patrons and our YouTube members for making this type of content possible. This long form stuff wouldn't be doable without their support. We wouldn't have even tried it if we didn't feel like we had support on that end. So thanks so much. Subscribe, especially if you're watching on TV, so we can keep doing this. And if you're not on TV, still subscribe. And then we'll see you guys next time with some more content. And don't forget to come to our live stream on this day right here. This one. At this time. Just put it in your phone, on a calendar, put a notification on for 5 minutes before, then show up. I'm serious. It takes like 2 seconds. Just okay. All right, we'll see you guys later.